Before I start with Part 18, there's something I'd like to point out to the masses. Führer names a lot of NPCs after himself, and he's named another one after himself in Northrend, Lord of Phrazistraz. He gives out a daily quest in Wormrest Temple. But what's unusual about this particular NPC is that very often, though not constantly, a Draconid guard is right on top of him. This makes it difficult, though not impossible, to complete quests with this guy. But when you think about it, it is really funny. Führer decides to add another E-Peen to his collection, and that E-Peen ends up shoved up the butt of a Draconid. Justice, in all her myriad forms, has seen fit to manifest herself this way, and I am happy.
Now, before I talk about the changes to protection, there's something which I would like to point out. I found this out by accident while I was playing World of Warcraft, and let me tell you, it is very disturbing. Check out this video of me in combat. You see these numbers going up? You see that one that looks around 98-ish and the other one that looks around 60-ish? Guess which one of those is Seal of Righteousness procs, and guess which one of those is Retribution aura. I'll admit that part of this is because I'm using a rather fast weapon, but in my opinion, a passive ability like Retribution aura should never do more than Seal of Righteousness. I really think that Blizzard needs to rethink a lot of spell damage coefficients here. I've kind of covered our Seals and Judgments low damage in Part 17, so I'm not going to give it a skull here. But until they, hopefully, fix this in patch 3.1, this is also a shout out to my fellow Holy Paladins. Hey, use Retribution aura when you're soloing, it'll increase your damage per second. Significantly. Sadly. And now let's talk about the changes to protection. First of all, there's the change to Blessing of Kings. Honestly, I think that Blizzard is way too reluctant to drop this down to a trainable ability. I mean, come on, it's a buff. And any paladin who doesn't get this is only going to have, like, 2 blessings. Blessing of Might and Blessing of Wisdom. And when you consider what Blizzard has done with buffs lately, making it so that similar buffs like Blessing of Might and Battle Shout don't stack with each other, Blessing of Kings is going to be all the more in demand now, and only paladins who spec, or more likely off-spec, into protection are likely to have this. This really doesn't look like a good idea to me. And if Blizzard is listening to this and what I'm saying kind of makes sense to them, then please, don't do the following. Don't make Blessing of Kings a trainable ability that increases all your stats by 5% and then make a 5-point talent that increases it to 10%. Please don't do that. I sure hope I didn't just give them ideas. Past that, I'm really not sure how much there is to say. But I really can't think of anything bad to say after this. They've done quite a bit of talent reshuffling. I mean, take a look at how deep Redoubt is in the tree now. Nobody's complaining about that, though. They've nerfed combat expertise a little bit, but I can see why. Before, our stamina was scaling at a rate of 16%. Compare that to the 5% that warriors have, and you can tell we're going to lap them pretty quickly. Now we're scaling at a rate of 12%. Not really that big a nerf. They've consolidated some of the effects of Shield of the Templar and Guarded by the Light. They've added something to toughness that decreases the duration of movement slowing effect on your paladin, and they've added the buff that I proposed to improve Devotion aura, where it increases your healing by 6% rather than 3%. And lest it be forgotten, they've done something wonderful with Avenger's Shield. They've made it instant cast. Before it was a problem to use while you're in melee combat because you can't block or dodge or parry while you're casting. Plus, being hit all the time reduces your cast timer. But with it being instant cast, it's usable even in melee. They still haven't given us an 11-point protection talent. Of course, they're going to. Taking into account the change to Avenger's Shield, which is actually something that I mentioned earlier in this review, I think that the changes to protection even out to about a 1 heart. One thing that I really have to thank Blizzard for right now is the increase in the amount of communication that players are getting. I said earlier that there would be major problems if that communication floodgate didn't open real wide. Well, it has opened real wide. While I'll admit that not everyone who wants a reply gets one, there are replies all over the place. And even though this is true for all the classes and not just paladins, I feel like I have to give it a heart. You see, I can be subjective in Blizzard's favor once in a while, but there is one thing which I think is very well deserved at this point. Look at how persistent Ghostcrawler is, even in the face of things that have made other blue posters permanently leave the Paladin forums. I don't know whether this is Blizzard's deliberate intention and they're telling him to go post in these forums, or whether it's his decision, I'm going to keep posting in these forums to keep the community in the loop. But either way, I think his persistence in the face of death threats, that's right, he's getting death threats now, deserves a big fat 10 heart. I'll admit that giving hearts both for Blizzard's general openness and Ghostcrawler's specific persistence is a little bit redundant, but hey, if I can give 20 skulls to Crystal Forge armor because I hate it, I can give 20 hearts to Blizzard's communication because I like it. Anyhow, on to the trainable abilities. I understand that there was a pretty massive delay with Part 17, and I'm sorry about that, but part of the reason why there was such a delay was because I've actually started playing World of Warcraft again. And it's a good thing I have, because otherwise I wouldn't realize how great Divine Plea really is. It's a self-buff that gives you 25% of your maximum mana over the course of 15 seconds, and while this buff is on you, your healing is decreased by 20%. When I first heard about that, I thought, it's okay. But using it, I realized this thing is on a 1-minute cooldown. 1 flippin' minute. I think there might be other classes that are jealous of our mana regeneration now. Unfortunately, Paladins still don't have a new heal spell. What we have instead is 2 new tricks that kind of add to our existing heal repertoire, but they add quite a bit. I'm talking about Sacred Shield and Beacon of Light. Those 2 abilities really haven't changed at all, so they can't affect the final score. However, I should say that it's starting to look like we won't need a new healing mechanic after all. Hammer of Wrath is different now. I'm not sure whether to call it a buff or a nerf. It's a little bit of each. Before, in the beta, it was available at 35% health or less. Now it's back down to 20%. But it's instant cast now, something Paladins have wanted for a very long time, like since patch 1.8. Another thing Paladins have that they didn't have before is a change to Hammer of Justice. It's still got a 6-second stun, but underneath that there's also a 3-second interrupt. That was intended to make Hammer of Justice useful in raids against mobs that are stun immune. That is a really minor thing, and it really doesn't solve the problem I cited about protection earlier, where a protection paladin really can't get a caster mob to stop casting and start running towards him. Hopefully the 11-point talent will help with that. There's one last thing which I think deserves a heart. You remember how before I complained about how paladins really don't get to do much and it's just auto attack and seal? I've found that when I'm soloing with my holy paladin, I am almost constantly clicking buttons. This really makes it a lot more interesting than it was before. My only real complaint is that you don't get decent on-demand damage abilities until the higher levels. Taking all this into consideration, I'd say our trainable abilities deserve about a 9 heart. Alright, let's take a look at where the score stands now. 377 hearts and 401 skulls. Blizzard's closing the gap here. I think it's pretty clear that right now Blizzard doesn't hate paladins, although it's clear that they used to. Judging from how they've handled this thread, they might be anti-me rather than anti-paladin. When you consider that I've put devil horns on their company logo repeatedly, thrown mud on the names of 3 of their employees, and insinuated that their executives smoke pot, it's hard to blame them. Anyhow, I really can't think of anything more that I'd like to say. I'm sure Blizzard has been waiting for that for a long time. Anyhow, thank you all you people on YouTube and all you people on the Paladin forums, both in America and Europe, for all the support that you've given me. I'm really overwhelmed and surprised that it went so well. I'm kinda sorry it's over, but there's other things I'd like to spend my time on, like, say, playing the game. Plus I've got Snag and this other platformer I've thought of. But it really was lots of fun to make this review, even though it was a lot of hard work. And I certainly hope that I've done the Paladin class a lot of good. Anyhow, I'll see you around the World of Warcraft.